Okay, lesson 35. We continue with the philosophy of the Kleshas according to Patanjali from the book The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. We're in chapter 2, Sutra 13. As long as the root is there, it must ripen and result in lives of different class, length, and experiences. Kind of a cryptic description of something that is rather speaking for itself, kind of. This is about karma and how karma always wants to manifest. But because humankind generally is ignorant, we keep running around in circles, making the same mistakes again and again, and therefore suffering the same pain, the same misery again and again. So the sutra says, as long as the root is there, you will keep being rebirthed, you keep reincarnating, you will keep, if you do not believe in reincarnation, you will just keep suffering the same pain in this life again and again. And if you look around you, or maybe you recognize this in your own life up until now, up until you started awakening, that is indeed how it goes. People who are constantly complaining about things that they are experiencing, and it seems to be a never-ending affair. It seems to be something they are unable to escape from, unable to avoid. So people get a sense of being stuck. We get a sense of being stuck. We feel helpless. Until we start to see, of course, and that is what this whole philosophy is about, until we start to see the law of cause and effect at work. Until we start to see that it is certain actions that we take or not take that are actually leading to situations that cause the misery again and again. This misery, that situation, is unique to you as a person, because every person has their own karma. Things start to change when you actually start doing something constructive with your misery. And there are some interesting examples here. Maybe you have heard, maybe not, but you will be surprised that most of the billionaires, the tech billionaires, are actually from humble backgrounds. They have not inherited their wealth and expanded it. You know the proverbial story of the little kid starting their adventures in the garage of their parental house. I think that is where Bill Gates started, and where Apple, what's his name again?
Steve Jobs.
Yeah, started. In fact, almost all the billionaires that have sprung up in the past 2-3 decades, self-made billionaires, have all started from scratch, from nothing. Another interesting fact, which shows that they are carrying a karma with them that makes them suffer, but they have decided to canalize it and direct it towards a certain goal, an ambition. And they were lucky that at that point, technology took over the world and started booming. If they had not had the strength or the wisdom to take control of their destiny, they would have still been people from humble background, living from paycheck to paycheck, and not having any control over their lives. Poor people generally have an ambition to get rich, but more common is that they have this wish to be rich, but they never canalize their energy towards that goal, towards that ambition, because they don't know what to do and how to do it, or they just don't have the strength or the inspiration actually to take the bull by the horns and actually start working on their deepest frustration. So what people end up doing is complaining. This world is unfair. Those people are doing well and I am doing not good, and it's not fair. Why me? But in the end, it's all about us. It's our choice. And as yogis developing insight, consciousness, you will be able to trace back the misery that you experience in the present. You will be able to trace that back to your past. And once you start to see that, once you start to understand that, you also have the insight that it is something that if you do the effort, you can actually get away from it. You can actually break that vicious cycle and turn things around. Start taking control, literally, of your own destiny. Sounds easier said than done. It is easier said than done, but it is possible. And it is, of course, a long-term process. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The 1 step back is when you encounter obstacles, when you sometimes fail in your efforts. And it is important to know that the step back is actually a very important element of your process, because the 1 step back teaches you what you need to know to make the next 2 steps forward. Another example of people taking control of their destiny is, you know that I came to Korea because of my interest in martial arts. That karma has burnt up. I'm totally not interested in the active part anymore, but I like to watch the tournaments on UFC. The common demeanor of most of those champions is that they were bullied. They had very rough childhood upbringing. They were either victims of abuse at home with an abusive dad, or bullied at school or in the neighborhood. And instead of suffering, they took control and it turned them into successful fighters. People who do this, who take control, make lemonade out of the lemons that life presents them, are in fact rare. But it is up to us to choose, to decide and to choose to not be the victim anymore of past experiences. Another example where people take control is people with funny names. Have you noticed that in higher places of government, people have funny names? Not all, of course, but there are people with funny names. People with funny names are also being teased all the time. People always make jokes. And it's funny, but not for the person who is the subject of those kind of jokes. So those people either suffer and will suffer the rest of their lives in silence, or already when young, they put their hands in their sides and they say, just wait and see, I'm gonna show you something. It's those people that climb the ladders of government and they climb the ladders of corporate life to the higher levels of government, higher levels of management. It's karma driven. So either you fall off your cord, your tightrope, because you can't keep balance, or you take control and you make it all the way to the other side. Sutra 40. They have joy or sorrow for their fruit, according as their cause is virtue or vice. In yoga there is no good and bad. In Buddhism there is no good and bad. Things are just as they are. But we live in a world where we divide things into good and bad, virtue and vice. Joy and sorrow are the result of virtue or vice. If you engage in virtuous behavior, your vibration is positive and will therefore attract positive energy towards you. So good things start to unfold, good connections are being made. People are favorable towards you, tend to be favorable towards you. Trust occurs, enthusiasm occurs, cooperation occurs. Vice, on the other hand, improper behavior, breaking laws, harming, hurting people, that is a negative vibration that will naturally attract negative affairs towards you. So people will have ill will towards you, will not trust you, but will also not be trustable or reliable towards you. They will not be wanting to work with you or even talk behind your back in a bad way to other people, talking about the vices, the negative things, the cheating, the lying, whatever it is that you engage in, stealing, or violent behavior, abusive behavior. It all bounces back on you. Very important in all of this is that we start to see the link here. And it is only natural, because as a human being becoming conscious, all you want is to be more and more happy. You want to be happier. You want to be free from suffering, from conflicts. You want to have an harmonious relationship with people at work, but also at home, so that things start to develop in positive ways. People who are still in the first stage of the Kleshas, which is the stage of ignorance, they don't see the link. They don't see the law of cause and effect at work. So they just keep acting in the same way as they have done all their lives. And they will therefore also keep attracting the same kind of misery and suffering as they have been going through all their lives. What this is telling us is that it doesn't have to be like that. Open your eye, be alert like the deer in the heart chakra, and learn from the situations that you encounter. If good things happen, you know that it is something to keep. You know that there is something that you have been doing right. But when things go bad, go sour, when people start to resist, behave in a nasty way, or avoid you, then you have to, instead of blaming people, which means you label things good and bad, and probably label yourself good and the others bad, you have to start seeing that it initially starts with yourself. And once you see that, you will naturally try to eliminate any kind of behaviors that cause negative vibrations, that lead to attracting people in your surroundings acting in unfavorable ways, in nasty ways, in mean ways, or being uncooperative, or talking behind your back. And replace those by behaviors that you choose. Virtuous behaviors, positive behaviors. Start being nice, even when you actually feel grumpy. That is what it means to be the master of the universe. Regardless of your condition, you do not let your condition dominate or determine anymore how you portray yourself. So on days that you are grumpy, you just act grumpily, but then you attract a lot of misery that only makes your grumpiness worse, your reasons for being grumpy. Instead of reflecting your own bad mood, your own bad condition on other people who are not guilty of your condition in the first place and therefore do not deserve to be treated like that, instead of reflecting your bad mood on other people, you are conscious of how you feel and you will just not allow that to manifest. Instead, you put up a smile and you remain friendly, polite, and civil. And you will see that that is also the medicine, basically, to turn around your condition, your grumpiness. Because you have taken control, you spread a positive vibration, people react back in a positive way, and it turns into a good feeling. And your grumpiness may disappear like snow before the sun. That is what it means to be the master of the universe, to take control. Effort needs to be done for that, of course, but it is an effort that is easily done when you realize how powerful it actually is, how effective it actually is to turn things around, to turn lemons into lemonade, to turn a negative into a positive. Sutra 15. To the people who have developed discrimination, all is misery on account of the pains resulting from change, anxiety, and tendencies, as also on account of the conflicts between the functioning of the gunas and the vrittis. This is a very interesting sutra that explains a lot about our development as people with awakening consciousness. We have talked about diseases of the disciple, and this is in fact addressing some of those hiccups, some of those obstacles that you encounter on your path of awakening consciousness. Do you know the series of Viking with Ragnar? It is on Netflix these days. It started on History Channel. Well, Vikings is a very popular series based on history. So it is, of course, dramatized, but there are elements of historic truth in there. And one of those things that I came across was King Egbert talking with the Viking King Ragnar, and sharing an observation, a philosophical observation with Ragnar. And I wrote it down because it's really what we're looking at here, one of the diseases of the disciple. What King Egbert said is as follows: all is vanity and vexation of spirit. In such wisdom is much grief, and he or she that increases knowledge increases sorrow. Can you follow this? As long as you are ignorant, you are also ignorant of your suffering. You just go through life. You just go through life on a day-by-day basis. And all the obstacles and conflicts that you come across, you're just not aware that those are obstacles and conflicts. You just go through the suffering as if it is part of life. But now you awaken. Now you become conscious. And you start becoming aware of your suffering. That is what King Egbert said. The wiser you become, the more you will suffer. And that is people get into yoga to start feeling better, don't they? I did. But you do become more sensitive and conscious. And that results initially, it is a stage that you go through where you're more vulnerable, where you're more emotionally unstable, where you start to become affected by situations and conditions of the body and the mind that you were simply not aware of before you started practicing yoga. So this is something to always keep in mind. So let's read the sutra again. To the people who have developed discrimination, all is misery on account of the pains resulting from change, anxiety, and tendencies, as also on account of the conflicts between the functioning of the gunas and the vrittis. The conflict between the gunas and the vrittis, that sounds very mysterious and kind of theoretical, not practical. But this is about your condition. The gunas is tamas, rajas, and sattva, which is your condition. Your condition is fluctuating. And with your fluctuating condition, your vibration changes. So when you're lethargic, people can react to you in negative ways just because it ruffles their feathers. You being there, sitting there, being gloomy, being lazy, being lethargic. Or the opposite can be the case. You are hyperactive, very enthusiastic, and people who are then in a calm condition or in a lethargic condition can be very disturbed by a person who is very bubbly and bouncing around like a rubber ball. So our condition fluctuates, but the ignorant person is not conscious of that and just suffers through these fluctuations. Not you anymore. I have for years been saying, when the occasion arises, is that I am a feel-good professor. Yeah, you know why? Because of this. You are now a feel-good professor too, because you become so acutely aware of how you feel. And how you feel is important, especially when you become conscious of it. People who are ignorant, they often delude themselves into thinking that they feel good, while they are actually not in a good condition. For you as a yogi, that is not possible anymore. You only feel good when your energy is good, when you're well rested, when you eat healthy food, when you have the least possible conflicts in life to deal with. So part of the path that you are on is that you make adjustments in your life. You will try to get enough sleep because you know that you will not feel so good tomorrow morning if you don't. You will try to eat lighter, healthier, purer food because you know that you won't feel so good when you eat heavy and unhealthy food or big meals for that matter. You will try to avoid or existing conflicts, eliminate any kind of conflict that can be avoided. All conflict can be avoided, but we have a past to deal with. We have a load of karma in our backpack that is the cause of all the conflicts that we are basically living with, which in our ignorant condition we were simply not aware of, just thinking that it is part of life. Now we become aware and we find ourselves in a deep pool of conflict, existing conflicts. The purification, as we call it, is in fact that you slowly but certainly, gradually eliminate these existing conflicts. Some of those very deeply rooted in your life, in your childhood, in your upbringing. You become aware of that. You try to get a handle on it by developing insight, and then you try to eliminate those. And at the same time, you try to avoid new conflicts from developing. And for that, you have to simply become more cautious in daily life. You have to stop acting like a bull in a china store and walk a little bit more tiptoe through life to avoid ruffling feathers, to avoid causing waves whenever you can avoid it. Not always avoidable, of course. And when it is not avoidable, you try to limit it as much as possible. So keep this in mind always, that as a yoga practitioner, as a person becoming conscious, awakening, there will be suffering as a result of that. And it sounds in total contradiction with what yoga represents, meditation, sattva, but it is a natural result of becoming conscious, of getting rid, in fact, of our ignorance. So the gunas and the vritis, that has to do with our condition. Also mentioned is pain and misery resulting from change. Seoul is building very hard on infrastructure. When I came to Korea, there were only 4 subway lines. Now there are how many? And all of them have been extended in the meantime, going further outside of Seoul. What does this have to do with yoga? This has something to do with change. I lived in Sarangdong, and I would go to places by bus because there was no subway, unless you walk a couple of miles to the big road where there was subway line 4, and on the other side you had subway line number 2. So you take a bus. There's a village bus, there's a local bus, there's an interregional bus, and you use those buses to get where you want to be. So very close to home, you step on the bus, and they bring you very close to where you want to be. But now they have built a new subway line, line number 7. And when a new subway line opens, they always eliminate existing bus lines because they have become supercilious, what do you call it? Supercilious? Superfluous. They're not necessary anymore. So now you have to take the subway, but it's not bringing you where you have to be. So in the beginning, change always hurts. You grumble. Oh, why the hell did they eliminate those bus lines? I always took those buses and they always brought me to where I wanted to be. So this is why people resist change, why people resist even progress. Because they are stuck in habits. Change always disrupts. As a yogi, you are aware of that. So when you wake up grumbling because of changes that are there, you turn that around. You take control and you turn that around and you count your blessings. Yes, but with this new subway line, I don't have to transfer so often anymore. Yes, of course, it disrupts a little bit, but hey, in the long term, it's a good thing that this subway is there. Look, it eliminates all these gas-belching buses that pollute the air. The air will become cleaner if more people take the subway. So you just go into a conversation with yourself, summing up all the positive aspects of the change that initially is causing disruption. If you don't pay attention to that, you just become grumpy and dissatisfied and resist change, which is what all protests generally are about. When Amsterdam was going to build a subway through the center of the city, they had to break down some old houses, some old buildings. The whole city was turned upside down by rioting people that caused actually huge damage because they resisted change, they resisted progress. And ironically, the bulk of the people that were protesting would put themselves in the category of progressive people. It was the young university students that were on the barricades throwing fire bombs. The military police came in with tanks in the 70s to deal with those very violent riots. It was the people that considered themselves progressive that protested very violently against, in fact, progress. Change. Nobody likes that. It's human. But now, as a yogi, you understand that you don't like change, even as a yogi, or maybe even more as a yogi, because a yogi wants to be in sattva as much as possible, in peace as much as possible. But change is unavoidable. The world is always changing. So when you are hit by change, instead of suffering from it, simply take control. Change your mind about it. Tell yourself that it is inevitable, unavoidable, and that actually there are many good things about it. And if there are no good things about it, it means that you have to change your circumstances. Take control. Do not suffer. Worries and anxiety. I made a note here. Bucket list. You have a bucket list? Enjoy it. But be aware. A bucket list in itself is an unnecessary source of worry and anxiety. Surprised? Why do you make a bucket list? Because you're afraid that you're going to miss out on something before you die. So you make a bucket list. I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to go here, I want to go there, I want to experience this. But you look at your bucket list and you see that you have only checked a couple of those ambitions or goals, and you, without knowing, subconsciously, you start worrying. Will I ever be able to do all this? Then you feel the anxiety in your chest, in your heart. But you are not aware of it. So if you have a bucket list, enjoy it. But play with it also. Just tell yourself, well, it would be nice if I could, but it's really not that important. So when I can, I will pursue some of these goals, but only when reasonably possible. For the rest, actually it's not important. Because what's really important is that I'm here and now, and I'm healthy, and I'm happy. Worries and anxieties are, of course, natural. It is our instinct to survive. But we live in a world, over thousands of years, we have shaped a world that is relatively stable and safe. Of course, you can argue against that, but to understand what I'm trying to say here is compare the world today with the world 500 years ago. And it's easy to see. Just look at the castles that were built in the past. There are now Facebook groups where you only see photos of castles. The one thing all the castles have in common is that they are inaccessible. They were built in places on rocks where you just cannot come. There's only one road or one stairs that leads there, and it's very easy to be blocked. You know why? Because the world was a very, very dangerous place in those years that they built those castles. So they built them with very thick walls, high walls that are difficult to scale and very difficult to access. But the access would very easily be controlled and blocked in case of an emergency. Because the world was a very dangerous place. And you set foot outside of the walls of the castle, and the chance that you die is just very, very big. So the world has changed a lot. And still, we have, in our genes, we have this instinct to survive. In Muladhara Chakra, fear, worry, anxiety is all in the same category. So we say, what if? What if the house burns down? Or what if war breaks out tomorrow? Or what if I lose my job? Subconsciously, we very often confront ourselves with questions like that. It is good to prepare for the future. It is good to be ready for any eventualities. But it's also good to be aware of the fact that there are many worries and anxieties that are not rooted in the reality that we live in, unnecessarily causing disruption in our peace of mind. And it is very human. All humans do this, worrying and doubting. So it's something that you become aware of and you take control of. Do not let it paralyze you. Do not let it also determine your life. Do pay attention. Don't take unnecessary risk. Don't be foolish. But the majority of anxieties and worries that we have are unnecessary. Tendencies and habits. Taking the same bus every day, the bus line which is then eliminated, that is a tendency or a habit. I always use as an example, we live in a digital age, of course, but before I came to Korea, computers were only used in offices, and they had only a local network. There was no internet yet. There was no social media yet. So at that time, if you wanted to read the news, you had to have a subscription to a newspaper, which is every day delivered 6 days a week into your mailbox. Now, I lived on the 5th floor, and the mailbox was on the ground floor. And if you wanted to read the newspaper, you had to go all those flights of stairs, 10 flights of stairs, you had to go down to get your newspaper. And it's a habit. You have some time in the morning, and while you have a cup of coffee or breakfast, you read the news. You scan the front page before you go about your day. People enjoy. I have been reading the news since I was a child, for some reason. In the beginning, I was just looking at the photos, the images, before I could actually read. And then later I started to read the subtitles. And it expanded to reading the whole articles. I've always been interested in. So I had a subscription. And generally the newspaper, of course, is delivered every day. But then comes a day that there is no newspaper in the mailbox. And you've walked all the way down before your coffee, so still a bit grumpy. And there is no newspaper, which then makes you more grumpy. And you grumble, and what the hell is this? Where's my newspaper? And this paper boy, what an idiot. I've been doing paper rounds myself. So anyway, how do you deal with that? It's not there. So you have to go back up 10 flights of stairs, all the way up again, without your newspaper, knowing that you're not going to enjoy your morning. Are you going to let your morning be destroyed by that? Some people do. Or they will call the newspaper, the district office of the newspaper, where all these paper boys pick up their newspapers to be delivered, and you scold the manager of the newspaper office, district office. You scold him full of nastiness and what have you. That's generally what people do, which of course leads to a counter reaction. What I used to do if that happened is, of course, I would call the district office, but be polite and nice, and they would then, a couple of hours later, they would just deliver the newspaper. Too late, you're already at work, but they will deliver it anyway. But I would take out, from the old paper basket, I would take out the Saturday newspaper. Saturday newspaper in the Netherlands is huge. It's like 80 to 120 pages every Saturday. And it has many sections. It has a section on travel, a section on cars, a section on sailing, a section on houses, real estate, section on sports, of course. There are many sections and so much reading material that you don't even have time for it on Saturday and Sunday. So I would take out the Saturday newspaper and read some of the sections that I in the weekend didn't have time for. Instead of allowing the absence of the today's newspaper to destroy my good mood, you just adjust. Because you know how it works, just do not allow it to happen anymore. It is human, that is why it is addressed here by Patanjali. It is human because in our subconscious we allow ourselves to be triggered by these kind of issues. And because it destroys our peace of mind, sattva in yoga language, that's not a good thing to allow to happen. So we become aware of that, and as we are aware of it, we simply choose not to go along with it anymore. It's our choice. We are the boss. Good. Questions? Okay, we have a new pranayama which we will discuss after asana. Okay, let's have a short break.